But first, the bipartisan spirit of cooperation post-Hurricane Ian is over. It lasted roughly 72 hours. Quite literally, the search for bodies continues on Pine Island, Florida, and Fort Myers Beach, Florida. Yet here we go. Charlie Crist, who's running for governor, Democrat, claims Republican Ron DeSantis interrupted relief efforts to tour hurricane damage, critical supplies and resources delayed in reaching Floridians in need for DeSantis photo op. There's some serious questions about the validity of that, but here we go. You can imagine what Crist and the media would say if DeSantis didn't tour any of the damage. And CNN took DeSantis to task for late evacuation warnings. Late in air quotes. We'll have more on those tomorrow, but it is a kind of a made-up story. It comes from a New York Times report out on Saturday. Facing a dire storm forecast in Florida, officials delayed evacuation.
They were following the weather track, and they had to make decisions based on that. But, 72 hours, they weren't even in the cone. 48 hours, they were on the periphery. So you got to make the decisions the best you can. I will say, they delivered the message to people. They had shelters open. Everybody had adequate opportunity to at least get to a shelter within the county. But, a lot of the residents did not want to do that.
He went on to note that CNN had based their operations in Tampa because of just how late the forecast changed. We've come a long way from Thursday when both DeSantis and President Biden refused to politicize the storm. It was, in a word, refreshing. It was great. Then Kamala Harris weighed in at a DNC event about American aid abroad and said this.
It is our lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions and impacted by issues that are not of their own making. And so absolutely. And so we have to address this in a way that is about giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity.
Imagine sitting in Florida, your house is destroyed or it's simply gone, like my parents' house. On the left, the house before. On the right, the house after. It's gone. Here's a satellite image. Notice it is quite literally a bare lot. Nothing left. House vanished. They are one of thousands that either couldn't get flood insurance or could not get enough flood insurance. And they hear, oh, disaster relief is now a political tool. It's upsetting. Here's Florida Senator Rick Scott.
What Vice President Harris said yesterday, or day before yesterday, that if you have a different skin color, you're going to get relief faster.
That's not what the Vice President said.
So I think what we've got to do.
That's not what the Vice President said. She talked about equity and the problem within
FEMA has to be colorblind. FEMA has to provide support to everybody. It is also not helpful what the Vice President says when she thinks that FEMA is going to treat people differently based on their skin color.
Treating people differently based on their skin color is kind of always wrong. To be fair, Margaret Brennan is right. It's oftentimes hard to tell what Kamala Harris is saying at times. Hahn is here, host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. My over-under was Monday, so politicians continue to disappoint all of us, right?
Yeah, look, nobody should be politicizing disaster ever. Members of Congress should vote to support disaster relief because they never know when it's going to hit them. It's something that needs to be supported. I think what Kamala Harris was trying to say, although inartfully, I would admit, was that communities of color and poorer communities tend to be at the back of the line and sometimes don't get the relief they need because most of the relief is based on ownership and poorer communities tend to be renting their homes. I think that she could clean that statement up and probably say the right thing. I think that Rick Scott went way over the line in attacking her. I think that she was inartful in the way she said it.
Yeah, we're going to get into the story about the predictions being wrong and was it late and everything else tomorrow. But montage of forecasts being wrong. USA Today, where forecasts for Hurricane Ian wrong. NYT officials in Florida say shifting forecasts has complicated the timing of evacuation. NPR, predicting Hurricane Ian's track has been difficult. Experts tell us why. How long till this comes to all of the feet of Ron DeSantis?
Well, Ron DeSantis can't get blamed for the prediction of the hurricane, right?
Come on, but you know they're going to try.
Well, there's a zone of uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
And I have been hearing particularly about some local officials in Florida not giving the evacuation order soon enough. And whether that's true or not, that'll get turned out in the wash. The thing about these storm recoveries, I think Ron DeSantis has handled it so far so good. The problem is people have a very short patience in times like this. And he's more likely to be criticized for things that happen weeks from now than things that had happened before the storm. In fact, it might even be legitimate.
And remember, he's the guy who voted against Hurricane Sandy aid. So now all of a sudden, President Biden's going to come down on Wednesday. He's going to talk about the need for federal help. And then it's only fair that you run the soundbite of him criticizing the Sandy aid and the like. In the end, and this it sort of sounds like a kind of happy-go-lucky statement, but in the end, it's sort of the voters everywhere who lose when everyone politicizes the storm coverage and the aid. What are you going to be watching for on Wednesday between DeSantis and President Biden?
I want to see if everybody's on their best behavior. I want to see if DeSantis pulls a Chris Christie, gives him a nice big hug. I think he should, because Biden is the consoler in chief, and Biden is the kind of man who is not going to care what party you're from when he's writing a check from FEMA and helping the people of Florida. I think we should be helping all of our countrymen. Look, my community got devastated by Sandy. Florida is being devastated by Ian. We are all Americans. We are all countrymen. We should be wrapping our arms around each other and saying, what can I do to help?
We're spending most of our time right now, at least in Congress, talking about helping Ukraine. How long until this discussion of billions upon billions upon billions for Ukraine all the time and not having a blank checkbook, at least so far, for Florida, is going to be a real problem for the administration?
I don't think it's going to be a problem for the administration because I think that the president's party is going to support it. I think it's more of a problem for Republicans seeking the Senate right now, including Marco Rubio, who also voted against Sandy, was called out quite artfully about it yesterday on the Sunday shows. So I think it's a problem for Republicans who don't support this aid. And look, you know, Marco Rubio could be whipping for this aid all he wants. Rand Paul is probably going to vote against it because that's what Rand Paul does.
It's a good point.
For Val Demings against Marco Rubio, who also voted against this type of aid. Florida is very susceptible to hurricanes. They should, no member from Florida should ever vote against disaster relief because it's more likely.
Yeah, they're the ones who are going to get it.
Yeah.
Hey, last question for you, real quick. National gas price average today $3.79. A week ago $3.72. They continue to tick up. You've said over and over again that you think Democrats are going to hold the Senate. 15 seconds. Do you still stand by that, even though inflation now and is becoming top of mind once again because of gas?
I stand by it today on October 3rd. As much as I will say you have what a great haircut you have, I believe the Democrats are going to hold on to the Senate. And by the way, you've never noticed my haircuts, and I always do one right before I come on the show. But I noticed yours on a big night where there's another Chris going to be on this network.
You are the first Chris, my friend. It's good to see you.
I appreciate it. Nice to see you too.
All right, see you soon. Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.